welcome first of all to you all. Martin, Frick, I will introduce all participants, all panelists in a bit. I just name your names now. Martin, a very, very good friend, has been so long with the UNFCCC, many, many years. Maureen, Goodman from the Brahma Kumaris, also a very dear friend. And as David already mentioned, the panelists are probably here because of trusting relationships. And David Dunes from Israel, I will come to you and introduce you in a bit. Heike Schröder from the UK and also from Germany originally. These four are our partners in a dialogue. We will hear some stories from them today about how they use their leadership roles to build trusting relationships in times of crisis or in difficult, challenging moments. So you will hear stories and we will harvest them. And I would also like to welcome you, our participants here in person, as well as our participants online. And I would like to thank very much the hosts here of the SDG Pavilion, because since many years we actually do events with you on the UN climate change conferences. My name is Caroline Frauder. I'm with the Brahma Kumaris as well. And Brahma Kumaris is the organization which put in this event and is a spiritual educational school, I would say, with a consultative status to the UN, offering spiritual perspectives, value-based, ethical perspectives on global issues. And I'm also with the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies in Potsdam, one of our partner organizations here, a research institute working on the interface of policy advice and science and civil society projects. I just would like to briefly touch upon the main keywords of our topic today, which is trusting relationships, a very crucial question today, I think, how to build them, how to build trusting relationships between work colleagues, between countries. We have this, it's a big topic actually here at the COP, between nations. And then leadership. I think our understanding of leadership needs to change in these times. Last year in Glasgow, we had a topic of feminine and indigenous leadership, a very nice program which you can still watch online on our website, and also historical transformation. And I know that this is a difficult topic we don't really want to look at often, but I think I would like to use this event to also find an access to critical times ahead to see how we can prepare for it internally. And I would like also invite the participants now to think about these three keywords: trusting relationships, historical transformation, and leadership, and just take a moment to reflect what this means to you and for you, how these topics are connected. And I would like to have an active participation during the event as well. So you may also turn to the partner next to you and share a few thoughts which may come up. And then I will ask my panelists to share for 5 minutes a story about a moment when you had to lead a group through a not so easy situation and were able to build trust in people, amongst people, and in yourself. I would like to start with Heike Schröder, Professor Heike Schröder, whom I will now introduce. And I still hope you come up and share your ideas as well later. So Heike has been a fellow at the ISS, and that's how we got to know one another. She's a professor for environmental governance in the School of International Development at the University of East Anglia, the beautiful area in the UK. And Heike, would you like to share with us a situation where you had been building trust? Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I hope this is working. Can you hear me okay?
I think the microphone needs to be a little bit louder.
Is it possible to... I've lost my voice a little bit with the aircon in the last
I think I give
days.
you mine.
Okay, yes, thank you. That's much better. Okay, thank you very much, Caroline. I want to share with you a story of work that I was involved with for the last 3-4 years. It was on indigenous sustainable development, where we took our project into 3 indigenous communities in Uganda, Bolivia, and Papua New Guinea. And I want to share our experience in Papua New Guinea, where we basically landed in a community where some of the indigenous people knew one of my team members already, but they didn't know the rest of us. And they were suspicious in the beginning. What do we want from them? What are they going to take? How are they going to screw us? Because that has been the experience that they've had multiple times in the past. And they voiced this to us in the beginning. So it was very clear that the number one priority had to be one-on-one relations. They had to be able to trust us on a personal level. And this work had to actually happen in each of these various little communities in the area. So we spent a lot of time driving around and spending time with the communities, talking with them, and really having heart-to-heart conversations, really sharing with them in our humanity. And only that really then made the difference, that they took us in, they accepted us, they made us part of their families. And we had experiences where, of course, we were very vulnerable. So one time, so basically we lived in a little squatter house, and we had a guy with us who was there to take care of our security. And he was meant to be in the house all the time, even when we were out. And then my colleague and I came back early once, and the guy wasn't there. He put a chair in front of the front door, and we had all our computers in the house, but nothing got stolen. So we thought, wow, okay, they like us. They're not going to screw us. So it was the one-on-one and personal relations that actually also enabled us to stay in touch via social media afterwards. And it was so important for the ongoing work when we weren't on the ground anymore, that we were friends. And not only friends, in their community, they call each other brother or sister. So we became their brothers and their sisters. And that was fundamental to actually doing work over several years' time with these communities. So we wouldn't have been able to do anything without that very personal, foundational, relational trust between each other. So, yeah, I'll leave it here. Thank you.
Maybe if I may ask one more part of it, what was your learning regarding leadership and this building trust, in building trust?
I think very important is actually to be transparent, to be authentic, to relate on a personal level. And leadership is such a term where we usually think it's a top-down situation, where leading means delegating, or leading means being in charge or coordinating. But really, leading from below here means that one really builds the trust. One really brings people over to trust the group, so that then the work can start.
Thank you very much, Heike.
It's great to have these experiences that it really works, and that I think increases trust also in oneself, that maybe sometimes we have an intuition that this is the right way, but we don't know if if it works. So thank you for sharing that. David, you also have been a fellow at the Institute for Advanced Sustainability Studies, where we then met for the first time a few years ago. And after you have been with us in Potsdam, you actually initiated the first citizen assembly in Israel with the Heschel Center of Sustainability. You're an educator, and you have been working on democracy and sustainability projects since many, many years. Originally, you were born in the US, but I think since something 40 years in Israel now. What's your story?
Okay, thank you, Caroline. And that's a good story, Eike. That's a very good story. Trust. Let's start from ourselves for a minute. Think back on when you first came to the COP and how you feel now. Okay? Is there a change in your body? I feel it. I've already managed to get sick this week and come back, but once you feel better, and once you actually ground yourself here, you become more trusting, I think, of and more able to take part and to engage and to meet people, to have conversations. I think trust is related. It's first an embodied experience. Even before you make a relationship, you have a relationship with yourself. So that's the first piece for me. And I want to tell two short stories about where I've been involved in trust in my organization, the Heschel Center for Sustainability, and then a little bit about citizens' assemblies, which is another larger, I think, endeavor. Our organization, the Heschel Center, is one of the oldest and foremost organizations leading sustainability and climate work in Israel for over 20 years. And we've done a lot of stuff. I've been there almost from the start. And a few years ago, the organization went into some crisis. The crisis was mostly internal, of relationships and conflicts and unclarity about which way we have to go and what our vision is and what our strategy is. We couldn't come to agreement about things. And I think it was a make or break point for the organizations. You probably know all this, and you've been working in institutions, organizations reach sometimes that breaking point. And what happened for me was a transformation. I think for us at the Heschel Center was a transformative point, because people from within took charge, took leadership, and we went on a track. We're part of what we call a trust-based organization. You can look it up in the literature. It's called a teal organization, and there's a whole network of organizations that are non-hierarchical, symmetrical. There are no hierarchical relationships. People take responsibility for themselves, working a lot in teams in collaboration, and we came out of that a much stronger organization. We have two young women co-directing the organization today who led that process. So I think trust is also maybe easier for women in some ways, because women have we must admit it, guys, we have more of a emotional intelligence than we do. So that happened, and the change is almost miraculous, because the relationships are good, people can breathe, people collaborate, cooperate. It's fun to be at the Heschel Center today. So that's my first experience with trust. And if we're going to do transformative work in society, we have to be able to create those kind of organizations that walk the talk. That's what we're trying to do, to walk that talk. And another short story about citizens' assemblies and why I went into that, because when I came out to Potsdam in 2019, I was involved in a lot of citizens' participation and round tables and all kinds of all kinds of work to try to upgrade climate activism. And I was seeing that there was so much mistrust and so much, there was no communication between sectors. There was so much anxiety around the issue. And I was looking for some other alternative. And then when I came to the ISS, I learned about something that was going on in the world that I didn't even know about, the Citizens Assembly movement, which has taken off, and deliberative democracy. And I said, okay, we got to do this. And I came back to the Heschel Center and said, we've got to do this. And the people said, okay, we trust you. We don't know what you're talking about. We trust you. Go on and do it. And we did the first Citizens Assembly in Israel this year at a local authority in the north of Israel called Kiryat Tivon. It was very successful. And just to kind of, last point on it, okay?
But why did they trust you?
Okay. First, I think, good question, because in Israel, between organizations and with local authorities, of course, there had to be a sort of leap of faith. Why would they want to take this on and do this Citizens Assembly, which actually gives more power to citizens? It gives citizens a chance to shape policy. So in one way, I think it was the courage of the local authority and the name that the Heschel Center has within the milieu of an organization that's trustable. I think we have that kind of vibe in. Not too much, and nobody trusts anything too much in Israel, but okay, enough for them to take that on. But a citizens' assembly is also a process in which people in decision making have to trust that citizens have wisdom and have something to input that they might not have themselves, and that's a huge leap. And citizens have the ability to maybe create very creative policies, and for one thing, to give legitimacy for decision makers to take ambitious decisions. And climate change needs a lot of ambitious decisions. So when citizens come together and say, okay, we want this, and we've agreed upon this, and actually that's what they did. They took on the Citizens Assembly dealt with waste issues and how to reduce a landfill, waste that goes to landfill in this local authority. And the citizens came up with ideas and policies, which in the end the municipality took on. So they had to trust. The citizens also had to trust, because there was a lot of distrust of government and institutions and of democracy in our time. And citizens said, oh, they're not going to do this, they're not going to implement anything, we don't believe in this. And in a way, they went through a process in which they saw they were taken seriously. So it's not ideal, but our experience was very good with this, and we're trying to now scale it up to other places and to local governments and to national governments.
Thank you very much. I think this is a very good example to complement also the story of Heike, which was a local project in Latin America. And here we had an drastic organizational change, and local authorities kind of took the courage to trust an organization, to trust you, and it became successful. We have heard two stories. I would like to have a short pause and hear maybe one or two voices from the audience, what you are taking from these stories. Anyone like to share or a question, maybe a question or a comment? Yeah?
Something that I'm taking away from listening to your stories, which thank you so much for sharing, is that it is harder to collaborate with people who hold different identities from you, but it takes you further and deepens the projects that you're doing, and is very much so worth it, even though you do have to build in that time for the trust to develop before you dive in. So that's something I'm always struggling with, is how to communicate to stakeholders the time of building trust, and that is an important part of the project to consider, and we can't just dive right in. So yes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Any other comment?
I think it's more of a question, which you kind of both touched on a little bit, but more in much of my work, I feel that the trust is very significant. And just before I heard the need for transformative action in pretty much anything we want to do in climate change, the question is how we can take these kind of more local, smaller examples and move them up to higher level trust, let's call it. And if we can do it fast enough to make the change that we need to change in this crisis.
Thank you very much. So we come to our next two speakers. Maureen Goodman is the program director for the Brahma Kumaris in the UK. She lives in London, where the headquarters are outside of India. The organization is originally based in India, but outside of India, it's London. Maureen, and she's also our representative to the UN in Vienna. Maureen, what is your experience? What is your story you have brought for us today?
Thank you. Hello? Okay, can you hear me? No, not so good. Is that better? Oh, yes, thank you very much for the opportunity. And I think I'm taking away definitely from my first two colleagues the whole concept of the importance of investing in relationships. This is key. And the role of leadership is very, very vital. And the lack of integrity in leadership today is actually taking us into the climate crises that we now face. I would just like to give a very, in a sense, localized story, but it was from the beginning of the COVID pandemic. I know we want to put it behind us, but it's an interesting story. We have quite a big community in London of our regular students, over 300, and of course, much bigger outreach. But when it came to lockdown, we were suddenly 13 of us in a very big building, two big buildings actually. And of course, we had to manage, you know, whatever was, of course, cooking and cleaning and basic things, but also putting everything out online, also sending meals to those who are more vulnerable in our community. And it was really quite a challenge. And for me personally, there were two things. I knew that the fact that I'd invested in, there were 13 of us, and the fact that I'd invested in relationships and made friendships over the years meant that I was able to create an atmosphere, or help to generate an atmosphere where people could feel safe and people could trust. Because obviously you have to take quick day-to-day decisions. Things were changing quite rapidly, and there were actually different pressures on us from different quarters to do different things. And it was a group of quite, let me say, well-developed personalities. And I knew that the most important thing I had to do was to keep a very calm atmosphere and to keep the attitude that everything is going to be okay, everyone is doing their best, everyone is the best that they can be despite whatever was going on, ups and downs. And this is something, this whole art of keeping an atmosphere which generates trust was something actually that I learned and saw in our elder sisters, because our organization is run by women, and the founder in the 1930s in India, he had the wisdom to hand over the leadership to a group of very young women who then, now most of them have passed on. At that time, one of them was still around at the age of 104, and then she passed on just in March itself. And so I watched them and how they put so much emphasis on creating the right atmosphere, so that automatically generated trust and cooperation. And the other principle that I really took and I worked with was that they would work always with consensus. And I watched it in meetings because you'll have different opinions, but they would continue the discussion until everyone felt comfortable. So it wasn't a voting mechanism, but it was consensus building. And eventually, even if there was one or two, they would say, okay, for the sake of the whole, for the sake of progress, we will support this. And so these were the things that I learned in leadership. And, you know, when I think about trust, ultimately you have to trust yourself. And I know I had to trust myself a lot through that whole process, that whatever my conscience was saying or whatever my connection with God was saying, I have to trust it. I have to move forward. And if you trust yourself, there's a possibility of generating an atmosphere of trust and others trusting you and you trusting them. But the seed very much I found was trusting myself. And, you know, I think that transformation happens through really benevolent intention. And we need rapid transformation now. And so we really need to make sure that our intentions are very, very benevolent in everything that we do, in our thoughts and our words, and certainly in our practical actions. So there are a few thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. Right, now my... Thank you. So I'm glad we had our shared experience of the COVID time also as part of the stories. I think we all learned a lot from it. I'd like to introduce our fourth and last speaker today. Martin Frick has been, I think, 14 years with the UNFCCC, around that. So knows the in and outs from Christiana Figueroa's times and the Paris Agreement times. He's now in the food system and the director of the global office of the UN Food Program in Berlin. And many different work areas as a diplomat, so I don't share all of it, but I just want to say someone with really a rich experience in all sorts of very, very difficult contexts. Martin, what is your story?
Well, thank you, and maybe we can get a second microphone that actually works. That would be helpful. I want to talk about this process. I wanted to talk about something else because, you know, the stories that you triggered were basically invoking in me that trust is obviously the big thing missing here. And the trust that you need, I think, needs to be built on a fact. And the fact is that the climate is changing and that it's man-made. And this very simple and strikingly horrific fact has been challenged for such a long time by interested parties. So the first thing I want to say, that we have mistrust in the climate negotiations, is not a coincidence. There were people who were interested in seeding mistrust by challenging the basic scientific argument. And that was incredibly successful, because if you go to someone and say something terrible is going to happen, join me in preventing that, and particularly in a situation like climate change where the cause and the effect are delayed by decades, it's very difficult. People look at you and say, what are you talking about? It's a beautiful day, the sky is blue, it's warm, I'm happy. And you know, you would come back and say, haven't you read about the flooding in Bangladesh, in Pakistan? Haven't you read about the heat wave in India? But there would be constantly a party that's telling you, oh, this is natural, this is happening anyway. It's very, very hard to get the sense of urgency and community that you actually need to have. I'm so traumatized because I'm half deaf from the loud environment here, so I didn't want to speak too loud. So my first point is, in order to build trust, there need to be an agreement of the basic facts. And the basic facts have been challenged very strongly in the climate context. Because what is happening if you're establishing a fact that is true for you and for you and for you and for me? We have a community. We have something that connects us, you know. When you are on the Titanic and you run into the dancing room and you say, people stop dancing, the ship is sinking, and somebody tells you, well, I just checked on Facebook, it's not true, the ship is not sinking, then you have a big issue convincing people to do that. So this fact is established. Of course it is. It is established since many, many years. But still, in many areas of the world, people don't have this basic fact. It is like a diagnosis of a bad illness. If a doctor tells you you're suffering from cancer, you're going to see 10 different doctors until you finally find one who tells you, no, actually you're healthy. And whether he is a professional or she is a charlatan, whatever it is, you will believe that. So, if we establish this fact together, then we are a group. We can work on the situation. We can say, well, you are affected as much as I am, and so there is a reason for you to trust me and a reason for me to trust you, because we are working towards the same end. And so what I have been witnessing in these conferences is that mistrust was often coming out of the conference room, while in the other areas around where people actually connect and speak over a coffee or are crammed in an overfull shuttle bus or whatever it might be, this is where the trust building is happening. This is the second event I'm doing with Caroline here, and in the first one we had two wonderful ladies in the audience, and my impression was these are old friends for a long time, and it turns out they met 2 days before in the bus because something was going wrong and they were cramped in this bus and started talking. So I think when we ultimately need to reach 8 billion people, it's that every single conversation matters. And the more we are staring into the conference room, we are actually adopting this polarization that's happening there. The more we connect between ourselves in a circle around it, I think the more we are able to build this trust. So that was not the story I wanted to share, but I hope it's helpful in this context.
I think it's very inspiring, very helpful, and I feel very much with you how you must have been feeling through in these situations. And I would really also like to know how, despite of all the influences of people and nations not trusting themselves and not moving forward, you kept your vision to a higher purpose or a higher goal.
Well, all the magic is with the people, you know, and once you hear their stories from the ground, and that was the last 10 years. I am from Nigeria, I feel it in this and that. I'm from a small island state. I'm a farmer from the American Midwest, and when you see these different stories, you actually see this community emerging. And then climate change, and I'm saying something daring, but climate change becomes something beautiful, because it becomes a uniting force. It's something that pushes people together. And when you have a situation that you need and want to address together, then you are making friends, then you're helping each other out. It's beautiful to see often that it is in the worst human situations, in the deep crisis, where our humanity comes out and people tend to lend a helping hand and come together, because then it's not the time for games, it's time to really fix a situation that is often life-threatening.
Thank you very much. I think these were another two very rich sharings. I would like to know from you, what touched you? What are you taking with you? Do you have a question? Anyone like to come in here from the audience? Would you like?
Hi, Alex Murray. I'm with the Climate Action Against Disinformation, and I echo your point about the buses. I think it's the only place where no one's in a rush to go anywhere. They're stuck. They can't rush anywhere. So some of the best conversations have happened there. I think just your points around, your points, all of you, around building trust, I think is so key. We work with a coalition of organizations, over 50 organizations around the world, trying to tackle disinformation. And that side of trust, that getting ego out of the way, and trying to make sure it's not about how can we take credit or how can we get ahead in things, but it's about trying to agree a kind of common purpose. And it's only through that, I think, that we've been able to get groups that include small fact-checking organizations in Sri Lanka, collaborating with groups like Greenpeace and others, that you can kind of make that progress. So I think it was just a echo, I suppose, that point around building trust and the steps that takes to get there.
Thank you very much. Is there another one who would like to comment or ask a question? Maybe later. Heike, I would like to know more about your learnings being with indigenous communities and also in the context of changing environment. I heard you talking about your experiences with them, and what are your takeaways from their way of being and with one another?
Thank you. Actually, what strikes me is that there are so many different ways of thinking about trust, so many good recommendations of what can build trust. And I was quite curious about your comment, Martin, about that you have to have the facts in common to build trust. Because when we were in this particular community in Papua New Guinea, we did not agree on the facts at all. But we still wanted to build trust. And it was, I think that the facts are oftentimes very context specific. And for example, in the communities, different people believe different things about climate change. And it's okay, because it's, you know, the information that they hold is always based on their experience and also on the sources of their information. So we were able to overcome this. It didn't matter what people thought. We related to every single person as a human being. And we were curious about why they thought how they thought. And because they were willing to share their honest opinions with us, we were, you know, feeling grateful for their trust in us, that they would share with us how they thought about things. So that was another really curious, very interesting experience that I took from it. I don't know if I fully answered your question, Caroline, but it was on my,
Definitely.
it was on the tip. It was, yeah, I wanted to share that.
Thank you. I think that's a beautiful takeaway from your time with them. Also, the fact that we don't need to agree on the same views and still can have trust in one another, because there is a deeper level maybe we can sense in the genuine way someone expresses or whatever. I also think it takes courage to trust. And I hope that even if we have negative experiences where our trust may be misused, we still invest in the courage to trust. You would like to add?
Just a short one. That was the second part when I said if you hear the stories of the different communities, for a long time they wouldn't put the label climate change on it. They would say we have a water problem. We have more storms than we ever had. I'm coming from New York City. We had a hurricane. We never had that before. And there is the reality in which people live, from where you can build this common ground and this trust that you are saying, look, you know, what people experience here and here and here, there is a common basis to that. And that common basis is called climate change. And so we do have a collective problem, and we have an interest to address that in common, because none of us will be able to address it alone and fix it alone. The drought in the global community, in the local community, the storm on the Pacific island, that is not going to be solved by one community. So the challenge in all of the climate world is actually to get people in the boat and to say, well, I'm with you, I understand what you are saying. You know, this is something that has 1,000 different faces, but we are talking about the same thing. And I think that's the distillation process that creates trust, but it takes also trust to enter into this and recognition of the human reality of different people.
Thank you.
Hello, Martin. I really like the way you described that, and I think there is something to creating a collective. I don't know if it's agreement on facts, but a collective sense of urgency, a collective sense of destiny, of humanity, which we can see is happening here. But I want to go back to Lee's question, and it's something that bothers me as well. So at a small scale between individuals, we can see we can create trust. Maureen talked about how you can embody trust, embody that kind of relationship. But in the negotiation rooms, you say it's a whole different world. They're not trusting. There's infighting. There's conflict. There's competition. There's power struggles. There's money issues. So how do you envision this changing so that we can build a world that really does this transformation? Because in the end, the decisions are being made over there.
That's a good one. Part of my team is a young woman, and she's seen that the first time, came back to me and said, they really love drama, don't they? And I said, well, yes, drama is also a negotiation technique. Somebody comes with a sensible proposal and you are outraged, you're insulted, how can you even dare? And all the drama, and then, the other side is intimidating and we are negotiating another week and someone is trying to bring all sides together. That was not an innocent conversation. That was a bomb thrown in the conference room in order to delay. Because often what we don't see is, it's not only about the agreement. Even if you know that ultimately you will lose, if you are able to delay that losing by 2 or 3 years, you won. When you have an industry that is making money with the old model, every day of inaction is a very good day for you. So there are people who are spreading distrust. There are people who are, creating scandals when there is nothing to be scandalized about. So how do you work around that? I think it has much to do with the mobilization of communities, because nobody can stand in isolation. And the more people are around and saying, hey, come on, we need to agree on this, be a part of that. When we are working with indigenous communities that are coming out of those countries and holding their leadership responsible, and the same message is coming from the local governments, the same message is coming from the local university, the same message is coming from local youth, then these games cannot happen anymore, because there is a much broader community that's watching over the shoulder. And I think what we are doing here, 1,000 events like that, is we are constantly broadening the shareholder, the stakeholder area in that. And this is, I think, the only way. We need to get people in. We have a problem, and if there is a massive problem, you need to talk to the sovereign. And in the democracy, the sovereign is the people. So you need to talk to everyone.
Thank you. Before I will ask a question to Maureen, I would like us to just take a moment and become aware that we are sitting in this COP Martin was talking about, and we are part of this. From a systems perspective, we are creating, and even though we are a small number of people here, we do have a big impact. And just to appreciate all the efforts people are doing here, coming from all corners of the world, trying their best. Not everyone maybe in their own way, but those who do, this is a capacity, this is a power of people. Let's just witness and appreciate this for a moment. Thank you. Maureen, you can comment on what has been said, but I have a particular question as well. And David mentioned that we need to also trust ourselves, and we need to have a relationship with ourselves. And I think we learn so much, but in school and in what we do in our work, but how to really, really deeply, despite all other influences or people telling you you are wrong or you're an illusionary, visionary, whatever person, how do you really build trust inside and develop the power to become a leader in whatever way you can?
Thank you. I think, in fact, your question is related to what's been discussed very much because I do feel that there must be those very courageous individuals who are in the negotiations, who are prepared to really speak the truth. Let's put it that way. Because I have experienced with some who are part of those negotiations that they're conflicted inside. Because, of course, they have to do what their governments are telling them to do, but their conscience is telling them to do something different. And so I'm really waiting. Well, I don't want to wait. I want to find. We all want to find those individuals who have that degree of courage. And I'm sure that they are there, and they will make a difference. And trusting yourself enough to do that, it means that you're really putting aside whatever the consequences may be for the sake of following your conscience or your inner feelings or the values that are very true to you. And for me, this comes down to then a question of identity, because when I only identify with the things that I'm doing, I'm quite insecure, because at any point that can be something that's taken away from me, that can be something that's criticized, I can be dismissed from that. If that's really my identity, I lose my sense of self in that. And so that's why coming back to our inner identity of the inner being, our spiritual identity, is just so, so important. And we all have a conscience, we all have inner feelings, we all have actually a well of peace and love and wisdom within. And so it's so important that we stop and take time to reflect and to listen to that and allow that to emerge and to guide us. And once that starts to happen, things begin to change. They change for you in your life, but of course they change in terms of the work that you're doing. I don't think we are reflective enough in our societies. We just are reactive from one thing to the other. And so I think if there's one thing that can bring that self-trust, it's that inner reflection to really understand the self. I accept what's happening, but let me understand myself, understand what's going on, and then the wisdom and compassion to make a difference.
But just to make it very practical, how do I understand myself?
Well, would you like to do a meditation? No, you haven't come for meditation. Why not? You know, we all have different understandings about the self, and I suppose if I'm coming from I am coming from that spiritual perspective, I would not say that I am a physical being. I would say that I'm a spiritual being, because here we are, we think, we have memories, we take decisions, you know, we have feelings. These are not physical things. I know a scientist will tell you that they're just products of the brain. And I remember in one conference, someone who's very much in the materialistic model saying, well, I feel hungry, it sends signals to my brain, and I think about going to an Indian restaurant. And I thought to myself, well, why didn't you think about going to a Thai restaurant or a Chinese restaurant? There's something else at play there. It's not just some sort of chemical reaction. So we are beings. And so when we contemplate on that, we can then begin to know ourselves. So do take time for that. I hope that's answered the question, that there is something beyond the physical. And it's so crucial, because otherwise we can be so overwhelmed by the things that we're hearing here in this conference, and it's very difficult to cope. But when we find that anchor inside and we access our wisdom, we feel, yes, okay, I know what to do.
Thank you very much. I would like to do a 2-minute meditation in the end, and for the last 15 minutes of our program, I would like to move to the last part of the topic, which is a historical transformation. And I think it is a difficult topic, but I do think we need to find ways to open ourselves and prepare ourselves for the times to come. Martin, you have a very clear insight about what is about to come, and Heike, also, I know you are with the COP since so many years. I observe you are very clear about the figures and facts. Everyone here, actually, we all know, otherwise we wouldn't be here. But I feel you even said climate change, to see the positivity it brings that all together. And I think there is really a point that climate change actually is able to do something which otherwise would not have happened. And Heike, why are you not afraid? Why are you trusting in the time to come?
So my first COP was COP3, so I've been going for a long time, and I have definitely had a phase of doom and gloom and depression, and I was able to just let it go. I was getting bored of it, I think, and I just thought, forget it. I think that we've often had tremendously dark periods in history, and many generations have experienced some kind of, end of days discourse where they thought this would be it, but somehow we managed to overcome that crisis and move out of it and be stronger for it. So at the end of the day, I think I trust in the human spirit, and I just trust in our creativity. I know that when the things get really difficult, the humanity aspect of us becomes stronger. And so often when there's a crisis situation, people, find resources within themselves to find a way out. That is really miraculous. That's magical. So at the end of the day, I do trust that once we realize that we have a really big problem, we will do everything we can to overcome it. It is our human survival instinct, perhaps. So I think that we have it in ourselves to manage anything, to overcome anything. So I believe in that. And I don't believe in the fear. I do, but I try not to.
Thank you. Who would like to comment on this? You?
Well, very much in the same vein. I have a 16-year-old son, and he's as lazy as his father was in school. So he wouldn't do anything, and last second, when the test is coming up, he's working frantically, and he manages. And I think humanity is the same thing. We don't move until the system is really broken. And these days, the system is broken. It's flying in our faces. That's bad. But as you said, the good thing is that people say, oh, holy crap, this is really happening. This is really a situation. And then things can go really, really fast. Because if there's one unlimited source of energy, then it's human creativity and insight. It's all there. And even today, climate change is a totally fixable solution. And it is totally fixable because so many of the things that we are doing today are so wildly off target. They are so completely wrong that it's actually relatively simple to fix. And of course, I'm speaking about the food system, which is a good example for that, but also there are others.
Thank you.
I also have two grandchildren, aged 4 and 1/2 a year. And when they were born, I realized that everything I had done till now in sustainability and climate change work wasn't enough if I was going to secure their future. I'm a son of a Holocaust survivor. My father survived with his sister, and the rest of his family was destroyed by Nazi Germany in the Second World War. And you know, there's some people who came out of the Holocaust, and in Israel we hear this very, very much, with the notion this will never happen to us again. And Israel's built around a kind of, okay, we'll be strong and powerful and we won't let anybody fuck with us. Now that's okay. We built a state and there's some good things that have come out of that. But a whole different strain of people have come out of the Holocaust and things like the Holocaust, although there's, you know, it's hard to compare, but human tragedies, who've said, like my father and like many other people in Israel have said, this will not happen, this will never happen again to anyone, to any people. And that's where my commitment to justice and human solidarity comes from. And in my family history, I can see when my father came out of that, that huge trauma, he built his life again. And many people in Israel who are Holocaust survivors came to flourish and build families and be creative. We have a huge source of human resilience and ability to kick back. And I think we have to be able to tap into that and to say we can first of all avoid as much as we can human misery, and that's I think what we're doing here. Try to work for climate change is working to lower the amount of people and nature that is destroying or going to be destroyed. But at the same time, we can take hope, I think, from our human resilience and from our ability. I resound to what you said, Maureen. We need leadership, but everyone in this room has leadership in your own way. We are the people that we need right here, right now. And I think if we go back from the COP and say, okay, how am I going to take leadership in my way, in my field? How am I going to tap into that human resource of creativity in my way, of what I want to do? Then we can change, and then we can cascade, I think, in what Martin said, in that way in which we can cascade change and mobilize change, each in our different areas and together. So that's where I get hope from.
Thank you. I'm actually touched by all the things you said. Thank you.
Just to say that I agree with what's been said, and I feel very touched seeing the young people here And for the first time, there is a children and youth pavilion. And if any of you haven't been there, please do go there and see what they're doing. But their passion, like you were saying, David, is not for one group of people or one nation. It really is for the whole of humanity. They just don't have those barriers. And that is such an important intention that can help to bring about change, the inclusivity of everyone. And I do feel that something better has to come. We're not going to disappear. It may be in a different form to the way we are on this earth now, but there has to be something better. It's really a bit like a cycle, isn't it? We're in the winter, but there is going to be the spring. But I know that we have to really be strong, because there are things that we are going to have to face in terms of climate change in all our countries. And then I often say to myself, when there's a crisis, am I going to be someone who then says, help me, I don't know what to do? Or will I have the inner strength to then be of help to others? And so that's my aim personally, to build up that spiritual resilience. But it's something that is so important for all of us. And I'd just like to add one thing that I've often quoted, and it was from a French astronaut who was looking at the Earth from space. And he said, the Earth doesn't need to be saved, she just needs to be loved. And so that's a very different perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Just want to check in if there is a comment or a takeaway from one of you shortly.
Thank you. Me, I have something more to say. I don't know that if it is the question or it is addition, I don't know. I'm French people, I don't know more English also, but I will try. Okay, my first question is why we are in SDG Pavilion, but we don't speak French. Or you know that climate change is the work of every person in the whole world. But you speak on English. Somebody who don't know English, they will do what? Okay, my addition, you saw that I'm a foundation, I'm a director of an organization in Togo, West Africa. And we notice that in some villages, in Togo, especially in Africa, the people who are there in this village are doing open defecation. They pollute the environment, but they don't know nothing about this. But we could help also these villages also. And every time they are doing it, and they pollute the environment, they share also some disease. But the work we are doing here is like we are working for the town. You forget the villages. If we work in this side, it's like we can't find the solution of the climate change, because it is like some part of the world doing something and forget villages who they in the bushes. I want to. C'est difficile pour moi.
I think I got it. How can we make this, how is this relevant, what's going on here at the COP for local people? Thank you. Who would like to address that? Who would like to address how can what we are doing here at the COP be relevant for people on the ground?
No. You are the answer. You are a participant in the COP. You will be going back in your local community and hopefully transport the message. This is one of the biggest COPs ever. Has 40,000 people, but 40,000 is, if I would be good in math, I could tell you how much precisely, but it's a very small part of the world population. We will never get anyone in one pavilion, so we need to have ambassadors, and every one of you is, and you need to translate that into your own language. And not only linguistically, but also in the own reality. You need to tell the people you know, I've been there, this is what's happening, and here is what you can do.
Thank you, Martin. I hope you do that and take it with you home, whatever your learnings and insights are, and you can inspire many others to start being leaders. We are coming to the end of our event. I like to ask you to just close with a sentence of a message, a takeaway, and maybe I start with Heike.
So for me, the strongest kind of insight that I'm taking is the human creative ability to rise with the challenge. That it's very much something that is resourced from within. So it's so important to really come to this inner strength to be able to transport that outside.
To close, I'd like to close with a saying a good friend and Professor David Orr of the United States once said about hope. He said, hope is a verb with its sleeves rolled up. And we need to do our work, our inner work and our outer work with our people all over.
Thank you. I'm taking away the awareness that we all belong to each other. We belong to the whole of humanity. And also that the strongest power of transformation is love. Thank you.
I'm stealing my closing remarks from Mary Robinson. I was on a panel with her this morning and it was so beautiful. She said, what if is our best time is ahead of us? Because in climate we always speak about the good old times when we had 350 ppm and be afraid to give up all the things that we have. Well, the things that we have sometimes are noisy, congested cities, uneatable food, high pollution, dangerous working conditions. What if addressing climate change would help us really creating something that's worthwhile?
Let's thank our panelists and also your active participation. Thank you very much. I definitely take away a feeling of togetherness and power in the togetherness and trust. I would like to mention that we will make this event available on YouTube via our website www.eco.brahmakumaris.org. You will be able to get to our YouTube channel and watch the event later. Also the one I mentioned in the beginning, the previous one. And we have some cards, we call them blessing cards. It's our powerful thoughts to nurture our minds. And there will be two volunteers from the Brahma Kumaris going around and sharing these with you, and you can keep them with you in your pocket or your purse and look at it from time to time. And I am not sure if we also have some other material, but we are here for the next week with further events, and you can find our events also on our website. Thank you very much for coming and for being part of this. And thank you for reminding me. Let's share 2 minutes of meditation. And I will ask Maureen to share a few thoughts on that, and you have to go. Thank you for being with us, Martin.
Thank you. So let us take a moment in the midst of all the noise around us and the distraction to focus. Let me focus my thoughts on my inner self. I ask myself the question, who am I? I may have many obligations and responsibilities, and I may play many roles, but who is playing those roles? Who is the actor? That is the being, the spiritual being, the self. I'm a being of light. I'm a being of spiritual energy. And at the heart of my being is peace. I am a being of peace. I am a being of love. I am a being of wisdom. This is my anchor that I come back to again and again. And these beautiful, positive feelings inside create powerful vibrations that I share with the world around me, with humanity, and with nature, the earth. Giving back to nature just a little, because nature has given us so much. At times of difficulty, let me just remember, I am a being of peace. Thank you.